Good afternoon from the middle of Jerusalem. It's Dan Diker, President Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs. I'm sitting here with my two esteemed colleagues, Lieutenant Colonel Reserve Maurice Hirsch and Khaled Abu Toameh, Senior Fellow here for Arab and Palestinian Affairs. Today's program perspective on Biden, Mahmoud Abbas, and Gaza. The Israeli counter-offensive has resumed following Hamas's success in prosecuting what is known in the West as a ceasefire, what is known in Hamas terms as reload, rearm, and resupply. Clearly, it is the policy of the government of Israel that the terror counteroffensive will continue in order to completely disable the Hamas politically and militarily. The last week having been a very difficult interregnum on the one hand, clearly receiving over 80 women and children and elderly was a very, very important humanitarian effort and clearly one that had to be done. But as we'll discuss with Khaled Abu Toameh and Maurice, the psychological warfare aspect is an extraordinary phenomenon and one that has to be discussed because it really reflects deeply the Hamas's Islamic strategy. I'm going to just turn to my friend and colleague, Lieutenant Colonel Maurice Hirsch, for a very, very quick update on where we are right now in day 50. Goodness gracious, we're day 56, aren't we?
57.
57, day 57 of this war. And I will tell our colleagues from across the seas, we're nowhere near finished here.
No, we're nowhere near finished. So as you said, Dan, on Friday morning, we started back, Israel started back its ground operations in Gaza, extending now the operations not only to the northern area, whilst there is intensive fighting there, also extending them down to Khan Yunis, going south, and starting that area that needs to be cleaned out. We moved everyone down from the north to the south. We've attacked the terrorists in the north, killing thousands of them, and now we have to deal with the terrorists in the south.
The problem is that you have both a humanitarian corridor towards the south, and you have the Hamas focus and headquarters in the south. So you've got this, right?
So you've got that convergence of both sides, and you've just got a lot of people in that very, very small area. You've moved 1 million people down from the north into the south. They're living in tents and open areas, and so it's very, very complicated and complex as to how we're actually going to go in. All types of reports of areas that will be targeted, and notification will be given to the populations in those areas. Each area being broken down into separate sub areas. It's going to be difficult. But it's something that we have to do. Hamas is embedded within, also within the population in Gaza, within southern Gaza, within Khan Yunis, within Rafah, and that area, those areas have to be cleaned out. There is no way to leave those areas and to say that Israel has got rid of Hamas. So that's where we're standing at the moment, with that extending of the program down south. Up north, Hezbollah is back in the fighting as well. As Hamas stopped fighting, or the ceasefire, the humanitarian pause, the Hamas manipulation to rearm, reload, as you said. Hezbollah did the same in the north, and as Hamas breached the ceasefire and again fired rockets, so Hezbollah started up in the north. This morning, a substantial event in the north with 11 Israelis being injured by anti-tank fire. That whole area is again becoming quite an operational area, and really a war area. Let's put it like that. With the Iranian proxy Hezbollah really trying to make sure that Israel's attention can never be devoted only to the south. That's the goal, to keep us spread out across at least two of these areas, with constant fighting, constant rocket fire, constant anti-tank fire. That's Hezbollah's aim, to ensure that we're not able to concentrate our fire in the south. Now, what we're seeing in the south also is that, just as an update on the numbers there, after the different releases of the hostages, we now are left with 137 hostages still in Gaza. I mean, that's important to note. Whilst 118 were let out, were freed. Israeli women, children, foreigners, Thais, Russians were let out. There are still 137 people being held hostage in Gaza, with the Hamas authorities obviously playing that psychological game of who's alive, who's dead. The Bibas family, which has really made headlines across the world, mother, father, two babies, including a 9-month-old Kfir, who was abducted at the time, with the Hamas authorities claiming that they have been killed, and that explaining why they didn't release them. And so we're not really sure what's exactly going on there. I think there is a lot of fog of war that is encircling those whole things. And so this new fighting will again is designed not only to destroy Hamas, but also to again put substantial pressure on Hamas to continue releasing hostages. So that's an integral part of the fighting.
This is something I want to turn to Khaled and Maurice and this question. This is something was actually for both of you. This is something that's not self-evident. I've gotten a number of WhatsApps overnight, as we all have, an email saying, aren't you in Israel worried about the other 137 hostages? So why are you resuming the fighting? And it's a question that is an important question, because it's not self-evident that an Israeli aggressive counteroffensive would actually force the enemy to release more hostages, as it has been claimed that it has done until now, as opposed to stop the fighting and continue the negotiations over the hostages. Khaled, as somebody who's been following and has interviewed and knows the Hamas so well for so many years, help us understand the profound psychological operation, psychological warfare strategy of Yahya Sinwar and the whole the Hamas side in this, the past week or even more than week of hostage release was part of its psychological operations, and I must admit, I think we have to admit, they did a very good job in terms of prosecuting a psychological warfare against Israel that made Israel look somewhat weak, I must say, even though we're all delighted that children and women have come home, the elderly have come home, but at the same time, there's a huge price of deterrence that is being continues to be paid, and Iran is watching, the Arab world is watching, the whole world is watching, as to give us an insight, Khaled, on the deception warfare going on.
I think, Dan, that the Hamas strategy now can be summed up in one word: survival. Yahya Sinwar, Mohammed Deif, and Marwan Isa, the three leading commanders of the Hamas in the Gaza Strip, now understand that the IDF, that Israel is very serious, that Israel is really out there to get them. I think that they were hoping, and I don't only think, but that's what we were hearing from people in Gaza. They were hoping that the pause that we had last week would turn into a permanent ceasefire. And they were relying on the pressure that Israel is facing from the Biden administration, from other international parties, which would lead, which would see them remain in power. If there's a ceasefire, a permanent ceasefire, that's it. They've won. And now they understand, or since Friday, they understand that Israel is very serious. Israel is going after them. And that's why it's very important for them to use the hostages, the remaining hostages, as human shields. These are the only cards they can play right now. These hostages, the Israeli hostages, are their only insurance for survival. And they know that, as long as they are holding on to these hostages, there's still a hope for another extended pause, which could later turn into a ceasefire. So I would say that, Sinwar, Mohammed Deif, and Marwan Isa now realize that, Israel is very serious and Israel is going after them. And that's why they have hardened their position. Listen to the statements made by Saleh Aruri. Yesterday, Saleh Aruri is the deputy head of the political bureau of Hamas. They have something called the political bureau, Politburo. And he was saying that there will be no more release of hostages until the war ends. What Hamas is also hoping to achieve is a release of a large number of Palestinians from Israeli prison. They need to come back to their people with some kind of an achievement. You know, Dan, I've noticed in the past 48 hours something new, a new trend on social media, and also by talking to people in Gaza. More and more people are coming out against the Hamas leadership. More and more people are beginning to question.
Are we seeing this on WhatsApp? Are we seeing this in Arabic WhatsApps? Where are we seeing these?
In Arabic, and people still living in Gaza. People saying, hey, what's going on here? Why is Hamas sacrificing us? Why are we dying? Why are we still holding on to these hostages? We can't hold 137 Israelis and in return have 25, 30,000 Palestinians killed in the entire Gaza Strip destroyed. I'm hearing these voices from a large number of Arabs, a growing number of Arabs in the Gaza Strip, and this is something new that many people have not noticed. They're going to social media and speaking out for the first time since the war began. And this is also an indication that many people over there feel that Hamas has been weakened. I'm also hearing reports about anarchy. I'm hearing reports about people entering Hamas installations in the northern Gaza Strip and looting them, stealing from them. There's almost no presence of Hamas security forces on the ground. Hamas as a government is not really ruling over there. So this is, if you want, this is good news in many ways, that Hamas has been weakened. The IDF operation in Gaza has sent a message to the Palestinians that the IDF is very serious. You may recall that I said 2 or 3 weeks ago that if Palestinians in the Gaza Strip feel that Israel is determined to destroy Hamas and that Israel will fight it to the end, then you will see more and more people speaking out. And this is what I'm seeing in the past 48 hours, something unprecedented.
That's actually quite an insight. I haven't seen that insight that Khaled's bringing us from any of the discussion groups or the mainstream media discussions.
It's clear that the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip are feeling more of the onus of Hamas. Dan, it's something that we've seen also in previous discussions, that really even the level of support for the October 7th massacre in the report that we gave last week was higher in the West Bank than it was in the Gaza Strip.
75%?
75% overall, but it was 80% in Judea and Samaria in the West Bank, and only 65% in the Gaza Strip. That's something that really was very stark in its difference, and showed that really the Gazan people are feeling much more of the effects, obviously, of the result of that attack, because now there's potentially 800,000 to 1 million people whose houses have been destroyed, and they are asking themselves, well, why? Why did we allow Hamas to hide their missiles in the beds of our children? Why did we allow Hamas to hide mortar shells in kindergartens? Why did we allow these people to use our mosques and our schools and everything as launching bases? Because they've now endangered them. And I think that recognition, even among the Palestinian people, at least in the Gaza Strip, is much more clear. I don't think they're necessarily buying into the general narrative of, well, it's only the Israeli aggression. These people know exactly where the rocket launchers were, where the missiles were being hid, where the Hamas people were hiding in mosques. You can't lie to the Palestinians living in Gaza. They know where these things, and apart from those diehards who are insistent on telling the same narrative of victimhood and really blameless victimhood, I think that most of the Palestinians there will understand that Hamas really did bring about a catastrophe on them as a result of the October 7 massacre. I don't think they buy into the Hamas narrative. What's the Hamas narrative? We saw it last week from Khalila El-Khaya, who said that the goal of the October 7 massacre wasn't necessarily to destroy all of Israel, but it was just to put the subject of the Palestinian problem again on the main stage. They don't care how many people die.
Okay, Khaled, I want to go back to you following Maurice's observation here and talk about a real collision that is occurring right now. And it is a collision it's a head-on collision between the American administration's position that the Palestinian Authority, as they see it, it is self-evident that the PA should be coming back to Gaza, what President Biden called a revitalized PA, which has all kinds of understandings attached to it. And Secretary State Blinken has also talked about the PA coming back. Vice President Harris has talked about not 1 inch of territorial revision being taken. This is a collision because you will not find anybody in this Israeli government or in the army that is talking about the PA coming back. The PA is clearly part of the problem. They have been the major funders of terror. They have been the inciters of terror. They have been the promoters of Soviet and Nazi conspiracy theories, as Maurice Hirsch has led a JCPA unprecedented policy book together with our board member and great strategist on the American side, Sander Gerber, who basically saw years ago that the PA was the problem, and good for Sander. His vision has very much become a part of reality. So I want to, even though we have talked about this before, we're going to talk about it again, but there is such a disconnect, Khaled, between the American administration and I even think American political discourse on the PA really, in their view, being the solution, while we see those of us who are following the PA, following the war and the conflict, especially you've been doing this now for 4 decades. Help us understand from where you sit why the PA is going to result in, as you said before, another Hamas takeover in Gaza ultimately.
You know, Dan, the talk about bringing the Palestinian Authority back to Gaza and the talk about the 2-state solution is a delusion. And those who are raising these issues, these 2 issues right now, are engaging in self-deception. First of all, let's talk about bringing the Palestinian Authority back to Gaza. And this whole idea of, the Palestinian Authority can go back to Gaza and they will govern the day after Hamas is gone is ridiculous. It's an attempt to repeat mistakes of the past. It's an attempt to take us back to the 90s, the early 90s, or the post-Oslo era. The Palestinian Authority is not part of any solution. The Palestinian Authority is part of the problem. One of the reasons why Hamas is very popular and very strong among the Palestinians is because of the Palestinian Authority. First of all, when Yasser Arafat was in Gaza, he did not fight Hamas. Hamas flourished and prospered under him. Mahmoud Abbas came, when he was in Gaza, he did not fight Hamas. Hamas, again, became very popular when Mahmoud Abbas was there and Hamas was firing rockets at Israel. I didn't see Mahmoud Abbas, like Yasser Arafat, trying to stop them. I actually saw both of them embracing Hamas and reaching out to Hamas and trying to persuade Hamas to join the Palestinian government and the PLO and the Palestinian National Council and things like that. So we've already been to this movie before. The Palestinian Authority was in control of Gaza. It did not provide any solution to security-related issues. That's number one. Number two, in 2006, Hamas won the parliamentary election, and I covered those elections. Why did Hamas win the election? One of the main reasons why Hamas won the election was because they ran under the banner of change and reform. That was the name of their list. Hamas basically came to the Palestinians and said, listen, Yasser Arafat is a thief. Mahmoud Abbas is also corrupt. They stole your money. Vote for us. We will bring you good government. We will end the corruption. We will invest money for the welfare of your people. Dan and Maurice, I know Christians who voted for Hamas in that election in 2006. Not because they're going to convert to Islam, because it was a vote of protest also against the corruption of the Palestinian Authority. Now, what has the Palestinian Authority done since then, since it lost the election to Hamas? Have they reformed? No. Have they removed any of the people who were on their list and who lost the election because of corruption? No. It's basically the same guys running the show, but not in Gaza, now in the West Bank. So why should any Palestinian trust them if they haven't changed, they haven't reformed, and it's the same faces, it's the same people who were kicked out of Gaza in 2007 by Hamas. The Palestinians are not stupid. They're not going to accept the same people, the same Fatah or PLO people they kicked out if they haven't reformed, if they haven't changed. Now, look at our experience with the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. What is it doing? Is it fighting terrorism? No. Did the Palestinian Authority arrest one member of the Jenin Battalion in Jenin? Jenin Battalion, to remind you, is a group that consists of members of Fatah, Islamic Jihad, and Hamas, and they're all funded by Iran. Who's doing the job in the West Bank? The IDF. The Palestinian authorities, they tried to fire rockets from the Jenin area into Israel. Did the Palestinian Authority arrest them? Did the Palestinian Authority make any effort to arrest them? Who arrested them in the end? It was the IDF. So on what basis are you trying to tell us that the Palestinian Authority can be entrusted with maintaining security in the Gaza Strip if they can't maintain security in downtown Ramallah
or Nablus or in Tulkarem?
In the past week, during the release of the prisoners, the Palestinian prisoners from Israeli prison, I saw hundreds, if not thousands, of Palestinians marching in the streets of Ramallah, Nablus, and Jenin, and Tulkarem, carrying Hamas flags and chanting slogans, "We are all the sons of Muhammad Dif. We are all members of the Izz al-Din al-Qassam, the armed wing of Hamas." I didn't see one Palestinian police officer try to arrest them or stop them even. So, I mean, this is really, it's a fantasy to assume that if you bring them to Gaza, they will be able to enforce law and order over there. There's another point. The Palestinian Authority is already in Gaza. Many people don't know. The Palestinian Authority does not have security control over Gaza, but it has civilian control over Gaza. The Palestinian Authority pays salaries to tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people over there. The Palestinian Authority funds projects, they fund ministries. Almost each of the Palestinian Authority ministries has a branch in Gaza. So the Palestinian Authority is over there. The question is, can the Palestinian Authority security forces enforce law and order over there? And the answer is very simple, no. And all this talk about revitalizing the Palestinian Authority, and I don't even know what that term means. Does it mean changing the heads of the Palestinian Authority? Or does it mean restructuring the Palestinian Authority? Or does it mean creating new security forces? I mean, the Biden administration, which has been talking about this issue, has not offered us any explanation. What do they mean by that? And that's why we are revolving in a vicious cycle. I would be very careful about proposing all these plans right now about who will replace Hamas in Gaza. First of all, let's get rid of Hamas. That's very important. I don't see Hamas disappearing, by the way, overnight.
Well, this is another point of collision, Maurice and Khaled, in that we have heard clearly from the American administration that they're talking about giving Israel weeks and not months to accomplish this decapitation of Hamas, where it is clear to everybody in Israel, in the decision-making apparatus, it's going to take months at a minimum in order to finish this operation.
And on that, really, the Biden administration and Secretary Blinken is completely missing the point. He can't say at the same time, one, you have to hurry up because you don't have months of credit in order to carry out the operations to destroy Hamas. But at the same time, you have to minimize civilian casualties. If you want Israel to work quicker, to destroy Hamas quicker, then you have to take into account that the number of casualties,
will be
civilian
higher.
casualties, will most probably be higher. There is an interest for everyone that Israel work not slowly, and definitely not quickly, that we work methodically and systematically to uproot Hamas entirely and not rush, because that will cause mistakes. But at the same time, we also shouldn't think that we have months and months and months and we're still going to be fighting in a year's time. That also shouldn't be one of Israel's strategic goals, that this is going to go on for months and months and months without anything being resolved.
Yeah, there's a couple of questions here from our wonderful participants and family and friends. Khaled, do you feel that the Gazans are seeing that the Israelis are kinder than they were taught to understand and trying to help them? It's a very interesting question.
Look, I wouldn't say that those who are criticizing Hamas and cursing Hamas and, you know, just to give you some of the quotes I've been seeing in the past 48 hours, may God burn Hamas, may they rot in hell. These Hamas terrorists brought on us a disaster. You know, all these quotes I've been seeing, it's not out of love for Israel, by the way, as much as it's, you know, people just waking up and realizing that, you know, Hamas has brought on them disaster. So I would be very careful about, you know, depicting these people or Hamas's critics as Israel lovers. They're not going to take to the streets and welcome the Israeli army over there. But I would say that my feeling is that there's a growing number of people in Gaza who today are not going to shed a tear when they see Yahya Sinwar and the rest of the Hamas leaders surrendering or being killed by Israel, or if they see the Hamas regime totally collapse over there.
One of the things that Israel has not done, they have dropped a lot of leaflets, what they call warning leaflets, that out of complete compliance with international humanitarian law, Maurice, one of your expertise, they are warning civilians to get out of harm's way as Hamas tries to keep them in Hamas's harm's way. However, what Israel has not done is to send leaflets explaining how harmful the Hamas has been to its own people and why they have committed this deception warfare. We haven't seen that type of operation yet.
I think there has been. I won't get into details with that, Dan. There has been a lot done on that front. There have been tens of thousands of conversations that have been conducted by Israeli security forces, whether it be the army or other security forces, to explain that situation, to really emphasize that this war started because of Hamas. It's carrying on because of Hamas, and Hamas are responsible. I don't think that the responses that Khaled is seeing is that just the result of the Gazans maybe just opening their own eyes. It's part of that explanation process that really the IDF has been, I would say, quite heavily involved in. I think we're less reporting about these leaflets explaining why Hamas is responsible. But everyone is seeing, where every time you see the explanations about the El Shifa hospital and the tunnels underneath the hospital, and these are the explanations that are coming out. Yesterday, when you saw the videos, the IDF videos of a house clearly inhabited either by an UNRWA employee or an UNRWA refugee, in which they stored 150 missiles ready to be fired at Israel. These are things which they're part of that explanation. Avichai Edrai, the IDF spokesman in Arabic, has been, I think he's been doing 75-hour days. Literally, and really working around the clock, trying to get that position over, even in Arabic, and I think that work is doing it's carrying its fruit now. And I think the Gazans are understanding that it isn't just Israel and our whim to come and attack Gaza, but it is the product of Hamas.
One of the questions I see, Dr. Fiamma Nierenstein, who's on the call, has issued a question. Fiamma, one of the great authorities, a JCPA fellow and a great authority on global anti-Semitism, has asked Khaled, what is your sense about Sinwar's possibility that Sinwar would be killed in battle? A complicated question, because he has been using the 500-kilometer terror metro underneath all of Gaza in order to protect himself, his family, and colleagues.
I don't rule out the possibility that he will try to escape to Egypt. And that's why he and the rest of the Hamas leaders have moved to the southern Gaza Strip. That could be their last resort, or the last attempt. But again, everything's possible. We're dealing with a man who's a psychopath. He's unpredictable. Even Palestinians call him the butcher of Khan Yunis, because he was famous for killing mercilessly a Palestinian suspected of collaboration with Israel, he buried one man alive.
So that reputation precedes him in Gaza, right?
Yes. I wouldn't say he has many fans. And, over the years, we've been hearing all these reports that some of the Hamas leaders, the political leaders who left Gaza, they left because of him. I mean, even for the Hamas leaders, he was too much. He was too extremist, too radical. They were afraid of him. So I don't rule out anything. Let's see. But what is clear from all these reports we are hearing coming out of Gaza is that Yahya Sinwar, Muhammad Deif, and Marwan Isa, the three remaining leaders in the Gaza Strip, are really beginning to feel the heat, literally.
Yeah, it's an important point that we really should. I know you've done some great writing for the Gatestone Institute as distinguished senior scholar at the Gatestone, as the senior fellow at the Gatestone Institute, run by Nina Rosenwald, who's really been a phenomenal force from the American side. Someone else has asked whether, Khaled, are you coming to speak to Biden and to the President of the United States? And you might say that Khaled and I are actually planning on being in Washington to speak to government decision makers and as well as members of.
It's not only about speaking to them. The question is, are they willing to listen? I mean,
I think so.
We write these things, as you mentioned. We write these things in Gatestone. I've been talking about these issues. People who have been following me for a long time know that these are my views. But the question is that sometimes you feel you're talking, to people who don't want to listen.
Well, there are a lot.
They don't want to listen to anything, Dan.
Well,
I think
the reason is, I mean, gentlemen, that we have to admit that Israel has played a central role in the branding of the reality that we see today for the last 30 years since the Oslo Accords have been started, that were founded, that were launched. Israel played a foundational role in establishing this concept. They say in Hebrew, conceptia, the concept that Israel and this fledgling Palestinian Authority, which is really the Fatah stemming from the PLO, would come to a diplomatic understanding. Now we realized over the years, but clearly now this was a grand war of deception that Yasser Arafat and his deputy Mahmoud Abbas, who signed on the Oslo Accords on behalf of the PLO, right?
So really, I want to weigh in on that. I want to challenge the word deception, Dan, and I believe that this is probably one of the worst forms of really misconception that we have, on the verge of racism. They haven't deceived anyone. The Palestinians have been openly saying, we want to destroy Israel.
Well, they haven't. No, they didn't say that in English. They did not say that in English. They said it in Arabic.
They say it in English all the time, Dan. We're just not listening to them. When Mahmoud Abbas says that he now wants to go back to the original petition plan and that he wants to flood Israel with all of the 6 million refugees, he's saying clearly that he wants to destroy Israel. We're just not listening. No. When Mahmoud Abbas says that the people responsible for what's going on now is America, it's the Biden administration that's responsible for the death of the Palestinians. He says it here in English. A report in Wafa over the weekend of Mahmoud Abbas talking to the latest gathering of the Palestinian leadership, saying, we will not accept anything other than a Palestinian state with Jerusalem as its capital and with the return of all of the refugees. We just have to listen to what they're saying, Dan.
People are listening, Maurice. I think that what they're missing is context. They're missing context, which is what we all have been writing about this, but Khaled's been saying very clearly for 4 decades that what they say in Arabic, what Yasser Arafat and Mahmoud Abbas say in Arabic, they say in English in different ways that create purposeful confusion about what the ultimate goal of the Palestinian national movement has been.
Then the question is, why don't Westerners listen also to what they say in Arabic? We've been writing these things, we've been translating them, we've been publishing them. You also have MEMRI, the Middle East Media Center, that has also been translating. You can't say that, we didn't know. That's why I share Maurice's belief or point of view. There was no deception on the part of the Palestinians. There was self-deception on the part of many Israelis and many people in the West Hamas was very clear about their intentions. Mahmoud Abbas has always been inciting terrorism and violence, and holding the Jews responsible for the Holocaust. So you can't say that they deceived anyone. No, they did not deceive. These are their messages. This is their charter. This is their strategy. This is exactly what they are saying. So I don't buy this whole idea that they deceived. No, there was self-deception, and unfortunately, it's continuing.
And everyone buys into that, Dan. The Biden administration looking to again revamp and to revitalize the Palestinian Authority when they know really there is no change there. This is an organization that is beyond repair. It is something which is fundamentally rotten at its core and cannot be changed. It needs the only way to revitalize and to change it is really to help hold those leaders accountable and to then move on and say to create something which is nothing like the organization that we have today, because that organization, just as a reminder, Khaled mentioned it before. He covered the 2006 elections. There, the American administration pushed for the participation of Hamas under change and reform. Look, they've changed their spots. They're a new organization. They didn't change their charter in the same way as the PLO never changed their charter. They still call for the destruction of Israel, the genocide of Israelis. How can they even possibly consider that they are legitimate actors? Just 2 months before the massacre, Mahmoud Abbas was meeting in Cairo with the heads of Hamas to talk about reconciliation. There wasn't a difference on whether we're going to massacre the Jews or not. The difference was only who's going to control the money with which we can then massacre the Jews.
And this is the same Abu Mazen, Mahmoud Abbas, who until now has not condemned the October 7 massacre.
See, but this is where Israel has failed to speak out against the American administration. Israel has got to take the lead in terms of public international messaging, calling out its adversary, its enemy, on these issues. It's nice for Maurice Hirsch to write this at Palestinian Media Watch as a legal affairs director, or Khaled Abu Toameh as being the Palestinian affairs commentator and reporter for the Jerusalem Post, or Dan Diker, the JCPA. At the end of the day, Israel has a official Israel has a responsibility to call out the U.S. administration diplomatically but forcefully on some of these issues. As a matter of fact, Reuven Hoch, I just took a look at Reuven. You have a very interesting question. What is the sense of why the American position is the way it is? What drives the American administration's positions? What are they looking for? Well, clearly we're in an election year. They're looking to satisfy a base that has been completely convinced that this is a territorial issue that has to be resolved territorially. That's first and foremost, I think the major problem. You've got he's got a very serious left-wing base to satisfy. And number two, people they truly believe this is in essence a territorial conflict, which it is not. It is a civilizational war. It is a global jihad. It always has been a religious war. This is I want to emphasize this point and then turn to you guys. This has always been, from a Muslim Arab point of view, from the Palestinian Authority's point of view, it has been a religious ideological war. And the fact that Israel, unfortunately, has convinced itself over many Israeli governments of all stripes that it's a territorial war has ended up boomeranging against Israel.
The problem is that people in the Biden administration and even people here in Israel still think that this conflict is about a settlement or a checkpoint or a wall or a fence or a Jerusalem or prisoners. And it's not. And you know what? I wish it were, by the way.
It would be simpler, right?
Yeah, these are issues we can sit and negotiate and talk, about the number of prisoners, the number of settlements, and what many people don't want to realize. And I've been writing about this for many years, by the way. I don't know if you've seen my articles in the Gatestone Institute and elsewhere. This conflict is really about Israel's presence over here in this part of the world. And my impression, and I believe I'm right, by the way, by following all the Arab media and talking to Arab officials and Palestinian officials all these years, My impression is that there is still a majority of people in the Arab and Muslim world that has not come to terms with Israel's right to exist. We have just touched on the core of this conflict, the essence of this whole conflict. That's what it's really about. Otherwise, how do you explain the fact that both the Palestinian Authority and Hamas refer to all Jews as settlers? It does not matter if a Jew is living in a settlement in the West Bank or a Jew is living in Tel Aviv. These are all settlers. These are all colonialists. These are all occupiers. A kibbutz inside Israel is a settlement. A Jew killed in a kibbutz on October 7 is a settler. The same way a Jew living in Ma'ale Adumim is a settler. And this alone should give you the sense of what we are talking about.
Yeah.
That it's really about Israel's presence over here. If it were about territory and settlements, we would have seen peace erupt between Israel and Gaza immediately after Israel removed 27 or 28 Jewish settlements and went back to the international border back in 2005. I was in Gaza back then. I was taking foreign journalists to Gaza, and I could not find one Palestinian in Gaza after the disengagement who saw the Israeli pull out from Gaza as a positive development, as a sign that maybe these Jews want peace. I remember very well when we were interviewing Palestinians in Gaza back then, 2 or 3 days after the Israeli withdrawal, 100% of the people we talked to saw the Israeli withdrawal as a sign of weakness, as a result of terrorism and suicide bombings. People were saying, wow, this is wonderful. We killed 1,000 Jews in 4.5 years, and these Jews run away from Gaza. So we need to continue shooting at them, because today they run away from Gaza. Tomorrow they will run away from Ashkelon, then from Ashdod, and then from Tel Aviv, and from there to the sea. What I'm saying is that if I were Israel back then, and I know it's too late now, and you want to leave Gaza, this is not the way to do it. You, in the Middle East, you don't wake up in the morning and run away. It looks like, surrender. It looks like capitulation. It weakened Israel's position, by the way, and Israel's status. We live in the Middle East. We're not living in Scandinavia or somewhere else. And in the Middle East, people watch you very carefully, and they see your steps. And unfortunately and sadly, Israeli concessions and Israeli gestures have always been read as a sign of weakness, which brings more violence. And that's why it's very important for Israel to finish the job in Gaza, because the whole world is watching. Iran is watching, Hezbollah is watching, and the Houthis are watching, and all of Israel's enemies are watching. If Israel does not finish the job, and if the Biden administration does not allow Israel to eliminate Hamas, then we will all be in big trouble over here, and Israel's survival will be in question.
I think that basically is the bottom line.
Then that's what we wrote last week, Dan. Last week was the 29th of November, the anniversary of the petition plan. Had this conflict been about territory and compromise, there would have been a Palestinian state 76 years ago. But there wasn't, because the Arabs reject it. They've rejected every single overture to peace ever since then. Between 1948 to 1967, what prevented
1947. 1947, 2000.
No, but I'm saying 1948 to 1967. In that 19-year period, what prevented Egypt and Jordan creating the Palestinian state?
Well, they never had an interest in creating a Palestinian. We knew that from 1948.
100%. They didn't care. They didn't even recognize the existence of this separate Palestinian people. They saw it as just another Arab country, and they didn't need another Arab country because it was Egypt and Jordan. So and then you had Ehud Barak's offer in 2000 to Yasser Arafat that he rejected. Ehud Olmert's offer in 2008. There isn't enough territory to give unless Israel is willing to say, you know what, we're finished with the Zionist entity in its entirety. Palestinians want a one-state solution, not in which they are equal citizens with Israelis, with Jews under Israeli rule, but in a one-state solution where they see Palestinian rule with no Jews here. That's the goal. That's what they said in the survey published last week as well. That's the drive, Dan, and that has to be the understanding also of the State Department when you install and then revitalize this organization that is their ideology. You have to understand, you will never bring about peace. You will never bring about an improvement for the situation for the Palestinians on the ground if all you teach them all the time is that you have to destroy Israel. And that is the message of the Palestinian Authority. That is what the Biden administration is so fundamentally missing about the Palestinian Authority and why it can never be allowed to go back into Gaza.
Well, this is exactly why at the JCPA we're writing. First of all, we're working on two important policy books. One is why the PA can't be a solution for Gaza, and what are alternatives. Maurice Hirsch, Yossi Cooperwasser, Khaled and I are co-authoring alternatives together with the Bitronistim, alternatives for Gaza, and also clearly why the PA cannot be a solution for Gaza. And we're also finishing up now the first draft of Jihad, what's called Ivy League Jihad, how the Hamas-inspired Students for Justice in Palestine have hijacked American campuses. Where Khaled and I will be coming to the United States next week. We'll be primarily in New York. We'd be delighted if you partner with us, if you joined us for some of these presentations. We'll be meeting with some of our dear friends and colleagues like Nina Rosenwald and a few others. Please join us for some of these presentations. Join us in these very, very important initiatives that we're going to be taking to Washington, because clearly this is a moment where we have to advocate for what cannot be and what can be and must be. We have to change the paradigm. It's been too many decades, Maurice. You've been writing, yelling, and screaming for decades with the phenomenal Palestinian Media Watch and now the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs. And we were just delighted and honored to have you here with us as one of our senior fellows. And this is what has to happen, dear friends across the sea, is we all have to change the paradigm, because nothing about this paradigm is going to work. And as Khaled said very clearly, the more that you show concession-based diplomacy, the more vulnerable Israel makes itself in a Middle East which has a gargantuan appetite to eat the weak ones, and at the same time they go on the defensive when you show strength and resolve and determination. So with that, let me thank everybody across the seas for joining us. We will be back tomorrow to answer more questions and to take your comments and to have your participation. We're delighted really that we have these opportunities together. Thank you very much for today, Lieutenant Colonel Maurice Hirsch and Khaled Abu Toameh, dear friends and colleagues. And thank you all very much. I recognize many of your names that you come day in and day out, and we're really delighted to have you in this conversation. We'd like to continue that.
And just before we finish, Dan, obviously there is that personal message to congratulate you on becoming a doctor, and for really finishing all of that long haul to achieve that great status. Congratulations from all of us here at the center, and I'm sure from our friends over the seas as well. We look forward to many years of great success.
God willing. And in fact, I'll just share with our friends across the seas that the dissertation was on nothing less than how the Palestinian national movement co-opted the Western discourse and convinced the Western discourse that the Palestinian national movement was really in truth the Zionist movement. How the Zionist movement was really the PLO with Yama Kazan, and
exactly.
So that was that kind of strategic deception. Though we can argue in English took place, or others can say it was never a deception. We just never listened. All of that is part of the dissertation. But how the PNM successfully co-opted the Western discourse is definitely something that is, you can see now, even with the Hamas, that has gained not a small amount of legitimacy in the Western discourse, extraordinary as that is. So we'll talk about that as we continue forward. Thank you all for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow at the same time.